Welcome to Static Rituals, the place where the darkness speaks and the silence screams louder. If you're new here, turn off your lights, put your headphones in, and whatever you do, do not look at your windows while I'm telling you this story. Because what I'm about to share with you was sent to us by a viewer who no longer responds to messages. The photograph you're seeing right now is real. The children in it are real. What stands behind them, nobody can explain. This is the window children. Let's begin. The photograph was never supposed to exist. That was the first thing Dr. Mara Elias thought when she found it tucked inside a manila envelope slipped beneath the door of her university office on a gray Tuesday morning in October. No return address, no name, just a single black and white photograph. Slightly grainy, the kind of image that felt like it had been taken in the late 1980s or early 1990s, developed in a dark room by someone who understood that some images needed to breathe before they were seen. She almost threw it away. She almost didn't look at it. But she did look. And once she looked, she could not stop. The image showed two young girls standing at a window. The window itself appeared to be on the second or third floor of a building. You could see the ledge, the frame, the hint of a rooftop below. The girl on the left was smiling. Not the kind of smile children give when they're told to smile for a camera. Not that stiff, performative grin. This was different. This was the smile of a child who knew something delightful that you didn't. Her hair was straight and dark, cut in a simple style, and she wore what looked like a pale pink shirt. She was maybe 7 years old, maybe 8. She looked directly into the lens with a warmth that felt, somehow, deeply wrong in a way Mara couldn't immediately name. The second girl, slightly in front, had a bowl-cut hairstyle and an expression of complete and total blankness. Not sadness, not fear. Blankness, the kind of empty stillness you see on the face of someone who has already accepted something terrible that hasn't happened to you yet. She looked younger, maybe 5 or 6. She wore a white shirt with what appeared to be a bow or a collar at the neck. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking slightly to the left of it, at something just outside the frame. And then there was the third figure, standing directly behind both children. Centered perfectly between them was something that Mara's brain initially refused to process. It was tall. It was dark. Not dark like shadow, but dark like the concept of darkness itself, like light had decided to simply opt out of acknowledging its existence. It had a shape that was vaguely human. A head, shoulders, a torso, but the proportions were slightly wrong in a way that was hard to isolate. The head was perhaps a fraction too large. The shoulders dropped at an angle that no human shoulder joint should allow. And the face, if you could call it a face, was a smooth, featureless oval of pure black, broken only by 2 pale points of reflection where eyes might have been. Or perhaps those were just the lights of the room catching the glass of the window. Perhaps. Mara set the photograph down on her desk and pressed both palms flat against the wood surface. She was a professor of folklore and anthropology at Harwich University. She had spent 20 years studying legends, myths, disappearances, and the stories cultures tell to explain the things they cannot face directly. She was not a woman who frightened easily. She cataloged fear. She filed it. She wrote academic papers about it. But her hands were trembling. She picked the photograph back up and examined the background more carefully. Behind the figures, she could see the interior of the room. A ceiling, a wall, the edge of what might have been a light fixture. Everything was mundane. Everything was ordinary, except for the figure, which seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, which seemed to exist in the photograph as something between a person and the idea of a person. She turned the photograph over. On the back Written in very small, very precise handwriting were 2 lines. They were found 3 days later. The figure in the photograph was not present when the picture was taken. Mara spent the rest of that morning trying to locate the source of the photograph through every academic and archival contact she had. She sent digital scans to colleagues in Japan, because something about the architectural style of the window, the collar on the younger girl's shirt, the quality of the light, suggested the image had been taken in Japan, possibly in the 1980s. She reached out to forensic photography experts. She posted in 3 separate academic forums under a pseudonym. By noon, she had received one response. It came from a retired archivist named Hideo Tanaka, who had spent 30 years cataloging missing persons cases in the Kansai region of Japan. His message was brief. "I know this photograph. I wish I didn't." The children's names were Satsuki and Amy Kuroda. They were reported missing on October 14, 1987, from their family home in Osaka. They were found 3 days later, in a disused building 4 kilometers from their home. They were unharmed physically. Satsuki, the older one, the one who was smiling, never spoke again. Emi recovered, but reported for years afterward that she could feel someone standing directly behind her at all times, even when she was alone in a room, even when she was in open fields with no structures for a mile in any direction. The photograph was taken by a neighbor who saw the girls standing at the window and thought it was a sweet image. The neighbor insists that nothing was standing behind the children when she pressed the shutter. "I don't know how you came to have a copy of this photograph. Very few copies exist." The original was confiscated by investigators and is officially lost. Please be careful, Professor Elias. I mean that sincerely. The people who have studied this image at length have reported, without exception, a feeling of being observed from behind. I have learned to ignore it. Some people cannot. Mara read the message 3 times. Then, very slowly, she became aware of a feeling she had not noticed building over the past several hours. A feeling so gradual in its arrival that it had slipped beneath her conscious attention, the way cold water rises around you when you're standing still in a river. The feeling that something was standing directly behind her. She did not turn around for a long time. When she finally did, her office was empty. Of course it was empty. She was being irrational. She was letting the photograph get into her head, which was precisely the kind of thing she warned her students against when they immersed themselves too deeply in dark material. She turned back to her desk. The photograph was gone. She had not moved it. She had not put it away. It had been sitting on the left side of her desk, next to her coffee mug, precisely where she had placed it when she finished her scan. But it was gone, and in its place. She noticed this only after several seconds of confused searching. In its place was a small dark smudge on the wooden surface of her desk, as if something had rested there that was too dark to leave a clear impression, too dark to leave anything but an absence. She called Hideo Tanaka back. She told him what had happened. There was a very long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Professor Elias, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not look at your windows tonight. Do you understand? Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see at the edges of your vision, do not look at your windows." "Why?" she asked. Another silence. Longer this time. Because it already knows you've seen the photograph. And it is very, very curious about people who look. The line went dead. Mara sat alone in her office as the autumn light faded outside, and she thought about the smiling girl, Satsuki, who had never spoken again. She thought about the empty expression on little Emi's face, the way she stared just to the left of the camera, at something outside the frame. She thought about what it must feel like to stand at a window as a child, to look out at the ordinary world and to feel something enormous and lightless and utterly patient settle in directly behind you. And she thought about how, in the photograph, despite everything, despite the wrongness of the figure, despite its featurelessness, despite the cold geometry of its presence, the older girl was still smiling. Not because she didn't know it was there, but because she had already been shown what came next, and she had decided there was no point in doing anything else. And that's where we leave Dr. Mara Elias alone in a darkening office, a missing photograph, and a warning she didn't fully understand. But here's the thing that should bother you. Here's the thing that should keep you up tonight. Hideo Tanaka. I looked him up. He retired from archival work in 2019, but his university page lists his last published paper as October 14, 2019, exactly 32 years to the day after the Kuroda girls disappeared. And the title of that paper? On the phenomenon of perceived observation in subjects exposed to anomalous photographic material. He never published again after that. This has been Static Rituals. Part 2 drops next. Don't go anywhere. And seriously, stop sitting with your back to the window.